Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. My name is Mike Langford, and welcome back to another episode of DearBands Live, the podcast that explores the paths and stories of career-minded artists and music industry professionals. If you're joining us on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe to help support the channel. My guest today, based in the serene Muskoka Region of Ontario, Canada, a songwriter, vocalist, owner of the Tonehouse recording studio, and one of the most versatile guitarists I've had the pleasure of working with. Years ago, I met him through his reggae-infused blues band, Laganza. Their repertoire has grown over the last decade, including several different genres, originals and covers, performing at functions from bar gigs to weddings to high-scale corporate events. Being flexible and versatile as a career-minded, working musician is often overlooked, but when you're hired to do a job, give the people what they want. Please welcome our guest today, Brian Hawley. Brian.
How are you?
Good, you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been...
Since Sunday.
Yeah.
What's new?
I missed you.
What's new?
Oh, not too much. Just plugging away in the studio here, trying to get these gazillion projects that I've piled up over COVID. I might go.
To say the least, yeah, that's been a thing.
Yeah.
Major increase in recording over the last 18 months, that's for sure.
I've got a feeling a lot of great music is about to drop. Just there must have been so much writing had happened.
I think so. I think out of the beginning, at least I saw in my Facebook feed, it was like cover getting released, because it's like people didn't have music because they were all planning on going out and touring.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, like, you're right. It's like that last year, at least, everyone's like, no, we really do have time to write some music.
Yeah.
And get it recorded. So
I enjoy that as well. I love hearing people's covers as well. I enjoy all that as well. So it's great.
The fresh take on it, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of, we chatted about it briefly before we started, and the reason I was there on Saturday, actually it was Saturday, it wasn't Sunday. You've got another project on the go right now. You've joined recently. Yeah,
I recently joined a Bob Seger tribute band who's called Against the Wind, and we're doing a EPK, which you were gracious enough to come help us out with. And yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to go down to the US to do some stuff once we're able to. Yeah. It's looking like 2022 for that, but we're doing all the prep work right now. So
that's the way to go about it. Yeah. I wanted to ask, just like, because that's one of the most recent things, because there was a bit of a gap for a lot of live performing musicians. Mm-hmm. So how did it feel getting back into rehearsal space with a bunch of musicians and more like getting back on stage?
Honest to God, I played guitar all through COVID. I built my studio and then COVID hit and it was like, okay, what am I going to do? I kept practicing. I kept playing every day in the studio. But when I got out to do rehearsal, or actually even better, my first gig, I felt like a deer on ice. It's like, whoa. Wow, it's amazing how you have to get back into it again. Like even though you're still playing throughout COVID, and it was scary. I was nervous for the first time in 20 years. But it all came back, and everyone's great, and I'm enjoying it. It's almost like I feel like I did when I first started.
Well, there's a different energy when you're in a room with people.
Yeah.
And even on my end, like as the drummer, usually when I'm learning songs, I'm just listening to the song and playing, against the song. But when you take that away and you get in a room with people and like, oh, bass is doing this. Oh, guitar's doing that. Yeah. Oh, this feels like that when we play it. It's a different energy altogether.
Totally. Yeah. You need that. It's what makes things exciting.
And you're saying too that like the whole deer on ice thing. It's very appropriate. It's very appropriate for the area that you live in too. So I did see some deer when I was driving out that night. But the idea of like that's a shock to the system for some musicians. Because again, you're in your controlled environment. And I'd say this too with a lot of, even with some bands, the idea where they rehearse and they rehearse and they rehearse, and then they think that everything's great, and then they get on stage in front of people, and it's just, it's not the same environment.
It's your nerves. You have to find a way to kind of overcome that, right? Like everyone, I guess, has their own way of dealing with it. It's almost like recording too. Like you can play a song perfect 1,000 times, but when that red light comes on, I'm sure you see that all the time. It's like it's like people think, oh, I can't screw this up. Like you can.
Well, screwing stuff up in the studio, that's fine because we can just run it again because we're not using tape. It's too expensive. But the idea, it is funny because like you'll hear someone play something over and over and over again. Be like, I got this. You hit record and it doesn't come out. But I can imagine when it's live, it's like it kind of has to happen. But then again, the moment can just pass. Just, I guess look confident as it's happening.
Yeah. some of my favorite moments when I'm playing live are when I make a mistake and it's the Band-Aid that makes it cool. It's like, oh, I'm going to do that again tomorrow. That was wicked.
Just how you get back into it.
I never do. Yeah.
So the other thing I always wanted to ask too with because the recording that you did with Against the Wind, how many musicians are on stage too?
It's 11.
It's 11. So
it's 11-piece band.
So it's a big band.
Yeah.
It was at a theater. You were filming it, recording the audio. So you go through all this time with COVID, and then you play a theater. And are there any people there?
There's no one in the theater, just the crew. Yeah.
So how does that feel? You finish the song.
The whole process was it was interesting. I think the janitor clapped at one point, the guy sweeping the floor, so that was nice. But we had a very few rehearsals going into that. So just to talk about that band, the band is amazing. The musicians are amazing. We had, I think, 3 rehearsals going into that, and then we showed up, and then it's just chaos, and everybody nailed their parts, and it was a pleasure to play with all those guys. Like everyone's so professional, and everyone's got a resume a mile long, so it's going to be a lot of fun. The crew was great there, but yeah, definitely weird having nobody in the theater, and you kind of got to make it look like you're playing live. So
yeah, you got to have that energy there. I imagine it's a collective thing though, with a lot of the musicians, especially if they haven't been on a stage or played with other people, the better part of a year and a half. Little short side story. Even like getting back on the ice for hockey recently.
Yeah.
Like a couple of skaters are like, it's a little bit emotional out here because it's been such a long time to just get out and have fun. And I imagine it's probably the same feeling or a similar feeling getting back on stage and being like, yeah, we're finally back here. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels really good though. I like the freshness of it, to be honest with you. I think how you get it. You've toured, so you know how it's like airport or van to gig, and it's like repeat tomorrow. It's the same thing every day. So you lose a little bit of the excitement. Sometimes it becomes a little workish kind of situation.
Yeah.
So having that break, actually for me, coming back, it just made it more exciting again, put the excitement back into it again. And it made it more like, I appreciate it so much, when you miss something. And it gave me a chance to take a break and learn different things about my instrument, the way I chart things, different styles, things like that. So I feel like I'm a better player now coming back from that. And I don't know how everyone dealt with the whole COVID thing, but I feel like I at least got some positive stuff from it musically. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's actually, you just made me think of something. The break, talking about that kind of forced break from music and just the perspective some musicians had on it. Because I've heard from some touring musicians that have just been grinding away for years and years and years. Yeah. And they're just like, and this is one part of the camp. They're like, I didn't realize how hard we were working and kind of how little results we were getting from it and how tired we were and just how miserable we were. And some musicians packed it in the last year because they're like, they were just so in that cycle they didn't have time to go, is this actually what I want to do? And they started doing something else, because also with some musicians, like that was their form of income.
Yeah.
And when it was gone, it's like, okay, how long can you just not eat before you're like, we have to do something else? And then there's other musicians, like it sounds like yourself, where like you had that time away and you could have a chance to miss it a little bit.
Yeah.
And want to get back out there.
Because Laganza is a very busy band. We play a lot, and there's times when, it could be 6 nights a week or somewhere. Sometimes we're double gigging, like 2 gigs in a day. And you get into that cycle, like you just said, where you just don't even, you start to condition yourself for it, eventually get used to it, and you don't realize how hard you're working until it's gone. And, but yeah.
Yeah, because it was a rug pull for a lot of musicians. Seeing, I still think it was Coachella was one of the first ones that like said that they were going to cancel, and then NBA did, and then like all the sports kind of followed behind it. But I don't think anyone thought it would snowball as quickly the way that it did.
That's got to be so weird for the NBA players to be playing and have nobody there.
It's like practice.
Like a scrimmage.
Well, that was super weird with NHL when they did the bubble thing in Toronto here, and they had the finals, and there's nobody there.
Yeah, it's just so crazy.
Weird. But I do think, not to go too far down this, I do think we're getting onto the other side of this now.
It's looking good, yeah.
It's looking better, and people are kind of finding their way. But that being said too, it is really disheartening when I see some of these bands getting pulled off their tours, people getting sick, and
right.
Again, it's super tough. Yeah, I don't want to go too far into, because like that we could fill 2 hours probably just
definitely
chatting about that, about where things are with musicians. But it's nice to see musicians getting back on stage, and again,
it is. I can't wait to go to a concert again. Like that's not mine. Just watch.
All right, there's other things I could ask. I'll save it for later on the show, because I think we'll get there. You as a musician, because I know you as a guitar player.
Yeah.
How did you get started? Was guitar your first instrument, or?
Actually, the funny thing is, I started out on the accordion when I was a kid. There was one in the house. And I think it was there was, my brother was playing with like G.I. Joes, and there was this big ugly red accordion at my grandmother's house. I thought that looked interesting. So really young too, like 6 or 7, I started banging around on this thing, and I would distinguish notes and tones, and then from there I think I went to the piano for a while, and then I come from a small town in the East Coast on Cape Breton Island, and it's a very musical island, as most people know. So it's either, okay, well, your parents sit you down, they say you're either going to be a coal miner, a fisherman, or a musician. I don't like seafood, and I'm claustrophobic, so no. So I ended up on guitar. I ended up on guitar from piano, and that was the instrument that everything kind of made sense for me. And it's been since I was, I think, 10 years old. My dad plays, and my uncle is in the Singing Miners, the Men of the Deeps, who tour with Rita McNeil.
Okay.
So I come from a very musical family, and it's the only thing that comes easy to me in my life, apparently. So yeah.
Well, just having access, and it's funny because like I never thought of accordion as being a gateway drug to playing guitar,
No.
but the idea, it's like having a guitar around, having a piano around, having an accordion around, having drums around, having all these things for kids to just experiment with.
Honestly, my dad had a guitar in the house, and it was just there, and I picked it up and I started to make some noise on it, and that's when it all started for me. Yeah.
I'm curious, because you told a story on Saturday about how like you really kind of not say you really got started, but like one of the events that kind of happened.
Well, how you learned
guitar.
The guitar. Yeah. The story is I was grounded for something. I can't imagine what, because I was such a good kid.
You were a good kid.
And back in the VHS days, if anyone on here knows what those are, I figured it used to be able to hit play, and I think it was fast forward, and it would put the video into slow motion. So I put on I think it was a Van Halen music video, and I wanted to see what he was doing. You know, I mean, Eddie's crazy. Like that stuff looks so insane. And I had to put it into slow motion. So play, fast forward, put Eddie's hands into a slow motion frame. So I would just mimic my fingers to what he was doing. And then eventually I could play it. And then I'd speed it up and I'd play along with him. But for months, I didn't know what I was doing. So eventually I had to break down and go to the library and get a book to explain to myself what exactly it was I was playing. So it was kind of a weird way to do it. And like once I figured it out with the Van Halen video, I moved on to like a bunch of other ones too. So it was like it's just weird thing I did every day. So that's how I learned how to play guitar.
I think it's awesome because first off, when you were telling this story, I have a lot of people's brains put into kind of two different camps. And one of them is like, I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to like not deal with this. And the other camp is like, I want to figure this out. And so when you were talking about putting the VHS tape into slow motion, so you could see what was going on, tuning aside, just kind of figure out what was happening there. It's like you were figuring it out. And the idea of getting the initiative to go to the library, find a book to figure out what was going on. Like that's somebody figuring things out. Yeah. And it's a constant with creatives, I find. Like they just figure it out.
It's like dinosaur YouTube. It's like a really technical version of it. Like nowadays you could just go on YouTube and somebody's already figured it out and shows it to you. But we didn't have that back then. I remember learning songs off cassette tapes and it's like, you're trying to get this one part and it's like, oops, fast forward. I went too far. Rewind. I went too far. It takes all day to learn this one part. So yeah, it's like.
Well, we can do that now with YouTube because you can run it at quarter speed. To figure something out. Because I like watching like BMX and skateboarding and stuff. And like when you put that stuff into quarter speed and you see what's happening in real time and you're just like, but with music, it's the same thing. Like you can slow it down and really see what's happening there. So I just think that's a smart for a child's mind to figure that out.
Yeah, and I'm like looking back on that now that I think about it. Now that we're talking about that, I was very strict on myself as far as how I was my technique. Like when I was developing my technique, which at the time I didn't really know that that's what I was doing, but I was very precise on how I wanted to learn things and hard on myself and. I'm glad I did that then because I don't think I'd have the patience now to do it. So, that was a very important time in my life, I think, to make me play like I do today. It's strange looking back now. It's a very strange way to learn how to play guitar. I'd be curious to see if anyone else has done that.
I imagine you're not alone when it comes to that way of learning. The other part of it too. The way of thinking with some creatives is, it just, for some people, it just flows through them, for whatever, there's just something that makes sense, be it piano, guitar, drums, whatever, it just kind of makes sense. But the idea of getting that book, to me, that's the brain going, okay, there's something creative going on here, but there's also something technical going on here. Yeah. And to me, technical is kind of the math. And the math makes things make sense. It kind of puts it in a box a little bit. So here's what actually was going on. Here's the chord and here's the phrasing, or here's the, whatever kind of melody or system that was going on. So I just thought that was interesting too. And you said that because it's like, okay, this sounds good and it works. Someone came up with this, but is there a technical reason behind it? Yeah.
And you can get lost in that part of it too. Like that reading it, you almost need a book to explain the book you're reading. Like sometimes with stuff like that, depends on how you get into it and how you kind of just, how you start with that. You want to kind of ease your way into that as well.
Well, to kind of bridge too, because we're chatting about something I think a couple weeks ago. Was it the Nashville?
Oh, the number system.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got into some session work with Andre Wall and some of the musicians. My friend Richie Levesque, who's an amazing bass player, and Kenny Post, amazing drummer, Tom Uhas. These guys were all using this number system, and I had never seen it before, so I was writing out chord charts on the fly. But then if the key changes, then you're looking at chords that aren't the chords anymore. It's like you got this big, messy chart. So the number system is so much more I guess they use it in Nashville because they're constantly in a session. You've probably seen it where they're like, no, that key's not working out. We got to change it. And if you got session guys in there trying to transpose stuff on the fly, it can hold up the session, and I don't want to be that guy. So I had to kind of, I got thrown into that real fast. So it's awesome. I recommend it for everyone.
No, it's funny sometimes with circles and groups of musicians where like you get in there and you find out something new after all these years. Because to sit down and chord, like to put charts together for a song, and you've got the chords there, and you're right, if they change what key it's in, it's your one's now not your one.
No, yeah. So even though that okay, we're only going up, it's like putting a capo on. Sometimes we'll be on a gig and we're like, we're going to capo up. Well, I have to play a guitar solo now. I know that we shifted everything, but your hand just wants to play it. I've done that
because that's where it is.
That's when you really learn how to bend a full step. Whoops. Yeah.
So what you're saying is I should use a slide for this.
Yeah, the slide. That's another funny story on how I learned how to play slide. Actually, now that I think about it, I cut my finger on a can of dog food, and
I'm not laughing about the cut finger on the can.
No, it's a pattern here.
You don't want that to happen.
No, I opened up a can of dog food and I said to my wife, I'm like, oh my God, I have 7 gigs this week. And I just cut my finger open, my third finger. It's like my bending finger. Like, I don't know I got on the phone. I tried to cancel them. I tried to get guys to cover for me. It just wasn't happening. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I sat down, tried to play guitar, and knowing not to use that finger, I still use the finger because it has a mind of its own. And I'm like, ouch, that hurts. I said, okay, I'll just stick a slide on there just in case. But no, like I can't bend the note now, so I'll slide up to the note. So I forced myself to learn slide in standard just till this cut healed. Well, that changed the whole way I play guitar now, and I still do it. It's weird after all these years, so that was kind of cool too.
Well, you figure it out.
Figure it out.
Trying to keep the gigs going.
And that's funny.
So you've picked up a guitar. Sorry, we put down the accordion. We've picked up the guitar at a fairly young age. When did you start playing with other musicians?
I started playing, and actually my first time playing in a bar, I think I was 11 years old. I think my parents signed like. Sorry,
11 playing bars?
Yes.
Those Cape Breton still?
We're talking about the East Coast here.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to double check.
You get your license when you're 7 out there. Yeah, I was 11. My parents had to sign like a form stating that I wouldn't leave the stage, or I had to have a legal guardian with me the whole time. But I started really, like all the other guys in the band were older, and yeah, it was crazy. It was an awesome experience though.
What were you playing back then? What kind of songs?
What kind of songs?
Yeah, songs, music. What were you playing?
I think we were in the 90s there, so we were into like Pearl Jam and STP and all that stuff, and then there's the typical bar stuff, like the whatever was going on at the time, like April Wine or Roadhouse Blues, or a lot of blues actually. I'd have to pull out an old set list. I think I still have one here.
I'm always curious too, because some musicians, I don't want to say they shy away from covers, but they just like dive straight into wanting to like write originals and just work on that. But I find there's a quality to, or an advantage, I'd even say, learning those covers early on, because you learn what those hit songs feel like. Because very rarely you're playing deep album cuts, at a bar gig for covers. You're not playing track 9.
No. You try to pull it off sometimes, but it never works. I learn a lot from playing covers. I learned how to, over the years, I encourage it. I learn, if you can really break down these songs, you can see how they're writing them. You can get your tone from that. Like if you like a certain tone, like I've developed my sound from a bunch of different players, right? And to the point where, okay, this feels good in my hands and it sounds good to my ears. So, but without listening to all that stuff, how would I have done that? You don't just plug in one day and sound good, right? You have to figure that out.
I'd say the only thing that you plug in and sound good is if you're playing Rock Band or Guitar Hero.
I suck at Guitar Hero.
I do too, because the timing's weird.
Well, before I even knew what it was, someone just said it's Guitar Hero on the Xbox. I don't really play a lot of video games, so I was like, so I get on there and I'm like, it's got the thing where it says expert or beginner. Of course, I hit expert, and I'm like, boot off the stage. Like, I totally suck at that. I can't do it.
The timing's weird. There's something about it where I'm just like, I don't think it's me, because I know that I'm in time. I really do.
Yeah, I'm like, did they make one with strings on it? Because I'll play the song.
I think there is a more modern one where you can play along on actual guitar, and there's other technology. But back with the whole tone thing, I think it was the Killers. I think it was Mr. Brightside or something like that. But I remember just hearing the tone, and I'm like, the tone's pretty good. Like, 'cause usually we're trying to get good tone, but it's like the tone from the record. So yeah, it totally worked. Just curious, like who are some of the guitar players that help kind of shape your style, or was there a guitar player early on where you're just like, I want to sound like that?
It's a bit of a mashup. Like I love Warren Haynes. I love Derek Trucks. I loved Eddie Van Halen growing up, because he's amazing. The thing that impressed me the most about him, it wasn't so much. It was the fact that he could play so fast, but play fast very clean. Like you can shut the overdrive off on his rig, and he would still be doing the same. Like it would still sound like the same thing, just without overdrive. Like that's a hard thing to do. David Gilmour. Oh, there's so many. The
first two you named, well, what acts are they from?
Warren Haynes is Government Mule, and he also played with the Allman Brothers as well. And Derek Trucks also was in the Allman Brothers, but he's with Tedeschi Trucks now.
Okay.
But they're very soulful. The thing I liked about them is, well, they're amazing tone, but there's the soulfulness of their playing, like how they choose their notes, and you feel something from their playing, and that made me like, I want to do that, right? Like kind of like John Mayer, like these guys, they all speak through their instruments, and there's something different about that. You're not just playing notes, you're speaking through your instrument with emotion, and getting that across through an instrument, I think is the ultimate goal at the end of the day. That's
when you're scrolling on Facebook sometimes, and now that's a good thing. But when you're scrolling on Facebook, and one of the things I saw was someone was saying, they're talking about instruments, and just like, the idea that musicians can take an inanimate object and make it talk or make it sing. And like, I've always thought about that, but it kind of sunk in that day. Just hearing that, because that's the truth. Great musicians, like they sit down with their instrument or whatever, and you just like, you really hear what they're feeling.
Exactly. And like going back to what we were talking about earlier about energy, I'm sure that you can take 10 gigs that you've played, and at least one of those is going to be the night that you had, like where you connected with your audience, and everybody in the band felt it. The energy was there. Everything was just right. You could play the same show tomorrow night and not get that same feeling from it, right? Yeah, it's weird. That's what makes it so exciting.
It doesn't always happen. Actually, that's a really good point you make too, because some people, they ask like, what's it like being in a band and stuff, and you're just like, when it's good, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And even too, like there's, you've been playing a long time. The idea, or sometimes bands don't always have they're not always getting along that day and having a good day. They get on stage and it just clicks again. And you kill it, and then you can go back to not like each other after. It's fine.
The after party's amazing. Everyone's hugging.
But yeah, it's a whole different thing. I'm sure in sports and music, they got a lot in common that way when it comes to that teamwork that's there. But but also too, you talk about with the audience. It's like, people ask what's it like being in a band and being on stage. It's like, well, when the audience really is dialed in with you, and it's just this feedback loop that happens. Mm-hmm. Everyone's there, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I do this with Tobin and from Laganza. We do this Neil Young show as well, and the people that come out to that, they're Neil Young fans. So it's great because like they're there to see that, they're there to watch you, and they're watching, like and you get talking to the people after the show, and they just love the music, and you can just see them all. Like when we're playing these songs, like I had an older gentleman come up to me at the end of the third show we did, and he was telling me about how he met his wife dancing. I forget which song it was, dancing to this Neil Young song that we played tonight, and he really appreciated it. And just seeing all that emotion out there, like from people's how they feel about that music, that's what it's all about. It was awesome.
No, it does bring people back to a time and place, and even to bring it back with them, with Against the Wind, the tribute band you're playing with right now. Mm-hmm. The idea of being able to hear those songs live and experience it live. It's one thing to listen to it, listen to the recording of it, but to go and share that experience with all those other people, I think that's what makes the difference for the experience for everybody. It's being able to do that collectively. Yeah,
it's even when I go to a show, I'm a huge Big Wreck fan. I first went and saw Big Wreck, and I got to stand real close to the stage, see all the gear, and just experience that whole thing. I've been listening to that stuff for so long, and it was amazing. Like, it just blew my mind. It's like, getting a record, and you get to open up the record and you get all this extra stuff inside, as opposed to downloading something, and it's like you get to download.
I'm sure we'll get there later talking about gear, because I do have a question to ask you about gear. But the idea, when you are knowledgeable about gear and guitars and equipment, everything, the idea of being able to look on stage and kind of poke around a little bit and see what people are using, I'm sure that's part of it. We're missing the live show from that as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm always checking that stuff out. Yeah.
All right, cycling back here for a second. So you're 11 years old. You're playing bars.
Yeah.
Anything that went on at some of those shows, or as a kid, you're just like, I don't know if I should be seeing this right now?
Oh, everything went on at those shows that I shouldn't have seen. Yeah, it matures you real fast. I think I lived the scene. Do you remember the movie Roadhouse, where the big fight breaks out and there's chairs flying and all that? I've lived that. I've been in the middle of that, without the chicken wire, of course. We probably should have had some of that at the one place we were playing. Some rough venues actually in the East Coast, but never boring.
Okay, well, if it's not safe for YouTube and for broadcasting, that's all good. It's one of those things like, when you talk about maturing really fast, it's like you, like, as a musician being in those situations, like, you do see people, and whether alcohol is or isn't part of the equation too, I'm sure you do see things kind of develop very, very quickly when you're playing those gigs, especially at a young age.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one time getting in the van to go to we were playing out of town the next day, so we were leaving from a gig to go to another venue, and we were probably an hour into the drive before we realized there was somebody in the van that nobody knew. He had a cowboy hat on, and it was one of those things where, is he with you? No. Was he with you? No. And he managed to we let him stay because he managed to smuggle out 2 pitchers of beer. So he was coming with us.
Yeah, the cost of admission was paid.
Yeah. He earned a seat in the van. That was a funny story. We nicknamed him Cowboy Curtis and never saw him again after that.
Well, shout out to Cowboy Curtis.
Yeah.
That could be butterfly effect in full force there.
Yeah.
It's always something that's pulling us forward. So when did you leave Cape Breton?
I left, I think, when I was 19 years old. Moved to Toronto, started working in Toronto, and ended up in Muskoka here, and met up with Tobin from Laganza and Derek, and hopped into that band. Immediately it clicked right away, and we started writing, and I've been here ever since. And just love it up here. I love being able to come down to Toronto when I need to and come back here.
So you're 19. You meet Tobin, guitar player, singer, and Derek, the drummer, Laganza. They're like some of the first musicians you jammed with?
When I got here, yeah.
And how did you cross paths with them?
Tobin was playing in a pub, and I don't know. I didn't think about that now. I met some other friends that weren't musicians, but mutual friends, and they knew I played, and they talked to Tobin about me, and Tobin came and saw me play guitar somewhere, it was another musician I was playing with named Jeremy Waterhouse when I first got here. And Tobin came and saw me with him on a gig, and that was when it all started. Yeah, Jeremy's still kicking around doing his thing, and he's like a reggae, blues, rock kind of guy. Cool stuff. Shout out to Jeremy. Yeah, that's how that happened. And I did a gig with Laganza, and it was funny because they were playing original music that I hadn't played before. So I just kind of jumped in there, and somehow Tobin and I started doing all this weird guitar stuff, and that's how it started. And it was probably me just being scared and nervous, and it just happened that way, and it clicked. And then we wrote the Both Sides record, which you gracefully.
That's where you cross paths on that one, yeah.
Yeah, and that was an awesome experience as well.
No, just a little bit of history on my end, like having the band in the studio, my old studio in Kensington Market here in Toronto. The two of you, both killer guitar players, and I remember just like hearing both of you play, and I was like, oh, this is easy because it's just whatever comes out sounds good and is right. And it's one of those things where, like, how much kind of, not to downplay engineering, audio engineering, but it's one of those things where, like, the quality of the source, which is the musician or whoever is performing, it's like so much of that is on the musician. And between the two of you too, it's like performances were great, but tones were great.
Yeah.
And when you talk about how you've been chasing your tone and just, like, is you still swapping out pedals on your board, finding
constantly. I'm doing it right now as we're talking.
But one of the things I did want to kind of touch on is just like finding your tone. Has there been kind of aha moments you've had when you've been between amps or pedals or guitars or anything you didn't even think of in the chain?
It's been a lot of trial and error. It's been a lot of because a lot of the stuff that I use, you can't go into a store and try it out. They don't have it. It's all boutique stuff from just various parts of the world, which is amazing. Like, everyone's building, it's all good. And that's what I'll say. Like, everything is good, but it has to feel good in your hands. Like, I've had expensive pedals or guitars, and, everything about it is great, and it would be great for somebody else. But for me, it doesn't work for me. So I have to move on to something else. So trial and error, and a lot of research, a lot of reading reviews, things like that. And you can kind of get a little bit out of reading a review. You can kind of, because you know what you're looking for. And sometimes somebody will say that thing that you're looking for, and that's a safe bet, and it works out. But it's tone chasing it's an expensive hobby. I'm running out of excuses to give my wife about why I need this new thing. But she supports it, though. She knows what I'm doing, and it's great.
And it's X number of dollars, and you're not sure you like it yet.
Yeah, like, how do you explain to your wife, like, I'm going to buy this thing that costs $1,000. I've never played it before, and I'm probably not going to like it, and I'll lose $400 on it when I flip it.
But I need to know.
Okay. Yeah, but I have to know, or I won't be able to sleep.
You mentioned reviews. Do you check YouTube ever for reviews? Like, is that where you're checking them?
Yeah, definitely YouTube. Sometimes I'd rather go and see if I can find written reviews as well. Sometimes it's a little more in depth, more detail, but definitely YouTube. A lot of guys are demoing these things on YouTube, and they're pretty spot on. A lot of them, like, you find some really good guys on there that are testing stuff, and they're spot on. When you get it, it's like, yeah, this is exactly like the demo, which is great. So that's come a long way as well.
One of the things you talked about earlier, just the idea of like having YouTube as an educational resource.
Mm-hmm.
X number of years ago, we didn't have that. We had basically magazines, books, VHS tapes and stuff like that. But the idea now where someone, and also too, you think about the rabbit hole it goes down, with boutique equipment, it's like before you might not have the resources to learn how to build these things. No. And so like you can go on YouTube, figure out how to build this thing, put the example up on YouTube, and then basically sell it off of YouTube. Yeah. So like, it's crazy how it's all, how well that system can work for people to create and be able to market and sell things.
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, Andre Wall, he says, you get tone in your guitar pick. You know that, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? So he hands me all these guitar picks, and we sat there one day in the studio here, and we just started playing the guitar. And I'm like, okay, listen to this one, listen to this one, listen to this one. They all sound different. After 25 years, I've just switched guitar picks to these other ones now because I can't live without these things. Like it just sparked this sound I was looking for that I didn't know I was looking for out of a guitar pick. It's like, I know it sounds crazy.
Are they boutique guitar picks?
They're expensive. They're $8 a piece.
What?
They're called V picks, and they're expensive. They're made in Nashville. I don't know what they're made out of, but when you touch your strings with these things, it's like a whole other tone. And I've A-B'd it to my other ones that are $1 a piece, and there is a difference.
Do they still fall into the sound hole of an acoustic guitar and end up in the dryer, just like a normal guitar pick?
They end up in the dryer. My wife has found guitar picks in the fridge.
It's like $8
everywhere. Yeah,
$8, Brian. What's this in the fridge? I know
these ones. I just ordered a bunch of them too. I got to find a way to not lose these. So if anyone has any tips on how not to lose a guitar pick, I'm all ears.
You know, they have those like the straps for glasses. Maybe you could get like one that goes around your wrist, a little piece of fishing line on it.
Yeah, so just make the guitar strap out of the guitar picks. Yeah.
No, I do subscribe to the guitar picks changing the tone, and I've been looked at sideways sometimes when I'm swapping out guitar picks, especially with acoustic guitars.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're like, not to get fussy about it, but there's like a scrapey way to play acoustic, and there's a pushing through the strings way to play acoustic, where like the pick can kind of snap its way across the strings or definitely flip them, however you want to describe it. But like, I got my box of guitar picks here, and we just keep swapping out gauges to find something that is better. So there is something to be said about that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Is there, on the tone thing still, again, I guess we have the guitar picks is one of those moments where like, okay, that is something. Mm-hmm. Has there been any, aha moments with amps or with a guitar pedal you put in where you're just like, this is a sound we're after, or has there been any times where someone is, giving you a hot tip on something and been like, hey, maybe your settings on your amp, try this, or like lower wattages or.
Yep. All of that. The nice thing about the gear and music community is everyone's so willing to help, like offer advice, like other players, you see what they're using and you're like, they'll tell you their take on what they're doing. And, you might take something from that. And I'm most certainly am always willing to offer advice to somebody if they're looking for something and they just want to, they don't want to go spend thousands of dollars not knowing, But amps, I've switched to, I'm using Sur amps now, and some of the new Fender stuff that's come out, the Pro Reverb, the Silverface stuff, amazing. It's all great. In the past, I used Marshall and all that stuff, which is great as well. But the stuff that's out now that's available to everyone is amazing. It's come so far. It's all good. Like, even the modeler stuff, like the Kempers and the Axe effects and stuff like that's come so far. Like, I don't know if you've used much of that in the studio, but
no, definitely.
Yeah, like remember when the pod came out, like the Line 6 pod, like that was cool. I think people still use those. I still love the green delay.
That not to cut you off, but that Line 6 like kidney bean pod.
Yep.
I'm not going to expose the guitar player that was. I'll tell you after the show though.
Okay.
But the guitar player that was using that for some bed tracks at the studio one time. I remember walking. I was on the gig as an editor. Excuse me. And I remember walking in the studio and being like, that guitar tone sounds like wicked. Like it sounds awesome. And I asked the engineer, it's like, what are you using out there? Because like I didn't hear an amp going.
Yeah.
And he's like, go look. So I went and looked because it's singer guitar player and they had the booth at Phase 1 there. And he was sitting in there and I looked in and it was that little red kidney pod, Line 6 kidney pod. And it was like, that was one of those moments where I'm like, so much of the guitar player's tone is in their hands.
It definitely.
And then the instrument, and then also being able to dial in whatever amp they're working with, because if it's not reacting the way that they want to hear it, because they know how to make that instrument do the thing. So if the amp's not doing it, they'll figure it out. So when I heard that, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to buy it anymore. When people are like, oh, that sounds like, it sounds like garbage. It's like, I've heard it sound pretty good.
Yeah.
So
no, it's true. A lot of it's in the hands, and I think I know who you're talking about too. But yeah, I mean, I have a really big pedal board, and some people are like, that thing's huge. Like, why do you have so much on there? And I think of it as a Swiss Army knife, because I play with a lot of different people when I do session stuff, or if I'm hired to play with, this band or that band or that band. It's different styles of music. So if I show up and you get into some rooms, sometimes some things don't sound good in those rooms. You got to be able to figure that out really quick. And it's all there for me. I know what works. I have my go-tos, but then I also have my plan B, I call it, on my board, where it's like, I'm just going to, this isn't working, so I got to go over here and see what I can make happen. And usually with what I have, I can figure it out in any situation. I haven't run into a situation yet where it's like nothing works, and I got to sell everything and start over.
No, it's just, you made me think of when you're talking about like some things don't sound good in the room.
Yeah.
And one of the sayings I picked up, you can move the piano or move the bench.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things in that room, if the room doesn't sound great with what you're doing, having a plan B there to try that comes with experience.
Yeah.
Because there's some musicians that might not have the experience. They would blame the room. Mm-hmm. Are you going to be able to change the room before the gig?
No.
Probably not.
No.
So yeah, so instead of having to swap out pedals all the time, it makes sense having the bigger pedal board. And
yeah, like what are you gonna do, right? So
this doesn't apply to drummers and drums and cymbals. You don't need to bring an 8-piece kit.
A plan B drum kit. Yeah. Oh my God. That would be insane.
You don't need to bring everything and the kitchen sink if you're a drummer. Just bring
I do know some drummers that do bring a few snare drums to shows.
That is different. That is different. Definitely asterisks beside that, but we don't need an 8-piece kit with 20 pieces of brass. Yeah. Just in case you don't need it.
No, that's a couple of fans. Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, there's this. We could talk about tone for a while. As far as I'm going to talk about it a bit longer though, because I like this gear talk. Has there been a pedal in particular where you're like, this was pricey, but definitely worth it?
I'll actually tell you about a pedal that's not pricey, that to be honest, I've been through everything, and it's the Full Tone OCD. It's a $150 pedal. Okay. And I put that thing against anything that's out there that's $500 or $600. It's on my board. I don't use it for everything, but it's an always on drive pedal that it's cheap. And I've had a few guitar players come up to me and be like, what is that? What's that sound? And when I tell them it's like, it breaks their heart when I tell them it's the OCD. They're like, oh, it can't be. I'm like, it is. That's what it is. And because it's not, the Full Tone stuff is amazing. Like he doesn't overprice things, and he just builds great stuff. And if you're looking for a go-to and you don't want to drop a lot of money on something, that's your best bet. So that is one of my go-tos.
That's a hot tip. That's a hot tip.
And on the other end of the spectrum, I recently acquired a more expensive pedal, it's called a Protein. And it's these two session guys from Nashville got together and came up with this. And it's two pedals in one. And I've been loving it. I've been using it for the last, I think, maybe 20 gigs I played. And it's been working everywhere. And I haven't recorded with it yet, but this thing's, there's a lot of hype going on about this thing right now. So I was skeptical about it because, usually when there's a lot of hype, it's just because they're trying to sell it. But this thing lives up to the hype. It's awesome. One day I'm probably going to get into doing some reviews on some of this stuff. I have so much stuff in here. It might be fun, but
helpful too with people on the internet.
Yeah. Well, I certainly benefit from that for sure. Yeah.
With lead work and slide work, is there a delay pedal or two that are kind of your go-tos?
I've been using the Walrus Audio Bellwether lately. One in my sights though, on my radar that I want to grab is the Chord DD 3000. I think it's the one the Edge uses. They made it into a pedal, which it looks awesome. And there's this preamp in it that's supposed to sound amazing, even without the delay pedal on. So I might grab one of those. But I like analog delay on the guitar. I always go for the analog delay. That one's not analog, but that'll be my digital delay. Yeah, I don't use delay as I don't utilize it though, like a lot of people do. I use it a certain way. I don't do the dotted eights. I find a lot of those crazy ones, they just get lost in the mix anyway when you play live.
Yeah.
So I go for I like a long trail, and I use it very subtly. So in between notes, it just trails a little bit. Everything just kind of blends together, but it's not overbearing on what I'm doing. Yeah, that's a good pedal though, the Bellwether.
Just throwing it out there. I'm not asking these questions so your wife can know what to get you, for the holidays. Or also, I'm not bringing this up and then she's making a list of all and putting the prices beside it and being like, no way, pick two things.
If she's watching, she's probably like, when did you buy the Bellwether?
Oh, I got another story for you after about gear. Talking about gear and musicians community, being very open about, talking about the equipment they're using, the gear they're using, guitars, and guitars are easy to see. Has there ever been a musician you've crossed paths with where they haven't really been open and you've snuck a picture of their pedal board or?
I'm trying to think. Oh, I remember opening for Trooper when I was like 16. And he had all of his stuff all blacked out. Like he had tape over everything. You couldn't see anything. Like he had
secret
stuff. Yeah. It was like, I guess he just didn't want anybody to know what he was doing. Yeah. It's almost like the smoke and mirrors thing. Like when you go see a band and there's like 20 Marshall stacks on stage and it's this little Mesa Boogie amp in behind with a mic on it. And that's what he's actually using. Like some people like to hide what they're doing, but
you just made me think. So I had Mike Turner on the show a while ago, and I remember his Our Lady Peace rig. It was in this big yellow, I think it was like a 16 or 20 unit rack space.
Yeah.
On wheels. Always have stuff on wheels, and it weighed a ton, and it was all MIDI controlled. So all his pedals were on little trays that would come. Yeah. So I can imagine if you're a guitar player and you're like, oh, I wonder what he's using. And you just see this MIDI controller that's super boring. That's just sitting on the floor.
You don't know what it is. Yeah.
No, it's just it's just like a black box with silver buttons on it.
I think he's still using the Axe FX. I think the last time I talked to him, that's what he was running. Just an Axe FX, a power amp, and a cabinet, and he's just loving it. And he gets great tone. I love Mike Turner. Yeah,
he'll put the time in too. Yeah, that's the thing. He's not just flip through some presets and figure it out. He'll put the time into figuring out how it actually works. But I remember he was doing some fly dates and he's like, I can bring if I don't even bring the Axe effects, I can just bring a USB key with my stuff on it. And put my settings and stuff onto it and then get the floor the pedal board and you're good to go. And you can just imagine because he was saying he didn't just have one rig, because you have to have a backup. Yeah, you hit a point where when you talk about having the plan B, well, the plan B is exactly like plan A. So it's these two giant rigs that had to come around with you. So if there was a problem, you can just unplug and go to the other one. But just the idea with some modern gear. Not to rant too much about it, but with modern gear, with Axe effects or I use Line 6 Helix all the time. When I heard it, and especially too when you talk about pedals and stuff, that was the main draw for me. How great I think the interface is with the Line 6 Helix native when we're recording, because it's if we want to put a phaser or chorus or whatever, we can go through a bunch of options for things, and it's super quick because not everybody has. I was spoiled at Pocket Studios with Mike Turner because he had so many pedals, and so many amps. So we had our real amp farm there, sort of thing. But yeah, for new musicians, for experimenting and stuff, it can kind of at least get you going. Yeah,
he has an original Green Rhino Overdrive.
Yeah. Way huge Green Rhino.
Yeah, he has the original. It's amazing. I remember I was telling him, we were talking shop one day, and I mentioned the Green Rhino, and he pulled it out, and he's like, check this out. I didn't even know this thing existed, and I was like, wow, there is a difference. Wow, that thing's awesome.
Oh, that was a good one for sure. That made it on many records. And it's one of those things you just kind of threw it in front of stuff.
Yeah.
Or like I don't know if it was like original Tube Screamers, but like they're one of those things you throw it in front of something and it just tightens it up, and you're like, oh, it just sounds better with this on here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've moved to Muskokas. You've met up with two other musicians, and you're still playing together after all these years. Yeah,
we're all best friends. Like there's been since the record you did with this back in 2010. There's been children born. There's been marriages. There's been life has happened, and but we're still very active in the writing and the playing. And when we get out together to play, it's like a bunch of buddies going golfing or something. If that's what you do, we have a blast. We have a great time. Great guys. There's never been any issues. Like, it's always just been fun. I can't recall any times when it's been chaotic or when someone's fighting or this guy's not getting along with that guy or whatever. I don't recall any of that, like, throughout our time together. It's just been awesome.
Well, there's a couple of points, like why I wanted to bring that up. One of them, the length of time as musicians being together that long, because like bands, they form, they break up. Musicians, they come and go. Life happens and don't have the time to do it anymore. They decide they just don't really want to do music like this anymore. So when I was thinking about it, it's like, it's awesome to hear that, know, and for the expectations that you've had on the music and the success you've been able to that you've had with the group of musicians, like, that's not something everyone can find even.
No, and it's a lot to do with you get the ego thing, right? Like, I never understood that. I don't think I ever will. And I think that creates so many problems that don't need to exist when you're in a band. No one in this band has an ego. It's not why we play. And I see it sometimes, even when you're out and about. I'm sure you have come across it. And it's like, you're not playing music for the right reasons if that's your attitude. And you're going to create issues with your band. And unfortunately, one day you're going to realize that. And, relationships are going to be destroyed over it. And I think that's a big part of why bands break up or fall into trouble, but everyone stays humble, and it's so much easier. It's like, this is fun. We're supposed to be having fun,
Yeah, ego and expectations. Those are two, from like the studio and producer side. Like, you work with a lot of bands, you see a lot of bands, and you see the dynamics between a lot of bands and musicians. Yeah. And you see the power struggle between some musicians, or you see the lack of leadership or direction between some bands and musicians. Yeah. And I'd say too, like working with Laganza, and like seeing the vibe, and it's fun, and everybody's good, and everyone knows what they should be doing. Yeah. And also, like, people will still bring something up if there's something in question or something, but like, as you're saying, the ego doesn't come into the equation. Someone was bringing something up because they wanted to clarify it or double check it. It wasn't like, hey, what are you playing there? Brackets, because I think you're not very good, and playing it wrong. It's like, hey, what are you doing there? I just want to double check this for a second.
Yeah, like we razz each other, of course. Like, in the studio, you probably noticed that.
That's like, different.
That wasn't bad, but could you just like suck a little less on the next one? And that's the fun part of it, right? But we keep each other on our toes, and we keep each other in check as well. Like, everyone has a bad day on a gig or in the studio or whatever. Like, God knows what happened outside of the music that day. Sometimes it comes in, and you have to kind of, but I'm lucky. Like, these guys have been there for me when I've had problems and needed to talk to a friend and get my head straight to play a show or whatever, and I'm here for them, and that's the relationship we have. And that's part of why a big part of why I think we've been together so long,
What you're leaning towards there, as well as the other question I had, just like the value of chemistry between musicians.
Yeah.
It helps if everybody's good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you can't get along, you know, or if you can't help each other through things, because there's a lot that goes into, especially with musicians over the long term being together. You're not just getting them, you're not just getting people on a stage or in a rehearsal space. You're getting their personal lives in it with it too.
Yeah.
You know, and like
everything. Yeah. You're forming a family essentially, right? You're going to be on the road with a band. Like when you toured with the bands you've toured with, you're in a van with these guys, like how many hours a day you're on stage with them. You're seeing them after the show. Like, when do you not see each other? Like,
that's why when you get off the road, it's weird because you're used to seeing people
exactly,
you know, 24 hours a day, sort of thing. So just the value of the chemistry that's there. And because I've heard stories where, you know, musicians been like, oh, you know, so-and-so's not that great, not that strong. Do you think that's going to be a problem? I'm like, they can play the songs. Do you trust them to learn the songs? Because that's all it gets down to sometimes. Because, you know, the example I give them, like when you broke down the side of the road, do you want someone that's the team player? Or do you want someone that's going to start throwing stones and cuss words and not really there for the right reason? Because that's all it gets down to. Because, and I'm sure you could probably expand on this, but just like as a musician, the amount of things that cannot go right.
Oh my God, I got to, you know, we did a cross Canada thing with Laganza years ago, and we took this old beat up RV that I think my drummer owned, and it was like a 1980 thing. It was like shag carpet, and we hired a friend of ours to come out and drive it. But we broke down everywhere, and we broke down in Ottawa, Montreal, New Brunswick, like everywhere, and it was funny. Like it was just like we laughed about it the whole time. Like we figured it out and we kept moving on. I think we missed one show in New Brunswick and then made it up on the way back or something, but. Yeah, that thing left us everywhere. And I think I remember reading about an incident you got into with hitting a moose or a deer or something.
Yeah, it was a moose.
Yeah.
It was a small moose, though, luckily.
What's a small moose?
I'm to put it bluntly, small enough it didn't kill anybody.
Well, that's
because when we saw the size of it, and when you see because it's hard to explain to someone how big moose can get.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like when you hit them, you knock their legs out from under them, and then they fall on your vehicle, and it's game over. So it was small enough that it took a good chunk of the windshield out, totaled the van. But yeah, it's one of those things where like it's much.
Was this sorry?
No, go ahead. Was
this at nighttime when you guys hit it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's scary because you don't really see what it is at first.
And not to go too far into the story, but it's one of those things where like we were all well aware of it, and we knew the danger of driving and just how things lined up. We just had to kind of keep going. And it's one of those things where like the three of us had our eyes peeled, driver, passenger seat, and I was sitting in the middle of the bench. And it's like everyone's just looking, but you can only see so much at night.
Yeah. And
it was one of those things where hopped over the side rail and now it's hit you. And I just remember the glass coming and like going through everything and just, it's one of those things where like, you know, driving through Northern Ontario at night, don't do it. You know, like, no, it's just, it gets down to planning sometimes. And like you roll the dice on it and it's one of those things. So, and definitely. Same thing I would say too with, you know, not to get into how to tour Canada, but just driving late night winter as well.
Yeah.
It's way better to have a problem during daylight than to have it at, you know, pitch black darkness somewhere and you're trying to make sense of things. And so if you don't have to drive overnight, it's highly recommended.
Definitely not. Yeah. It's a lot different, I would think, than touring the States where.
Well, you can still be stuck on a mountain in the middle of the night.
That's true. But the States are a little closer together, right? Like
very much. Yeah, very much. A lot of the you're not doing, what is it, like 14 hours from, you know, Calgary to Winnipeg or something like that.
Oh, it's so hard to make sense out of touring Canada. It's like
financially, yeah.
Logistically,
yeah. It's definitely tough.
Yeah.
No, I did back with the chemistry of the band. I think that's it's one of those things where like you don't realize how valuable that is until you've actually had it.
Yeah.
You know, because some musicians, I think they're so constantly running across people that have egos, have high expectations, and you know, expectations not just on the band but just on the musicians and on themselves, and like all that can be toxic. And when you have a group of musicians that can stay together for over a decade, there's a reason. And a lot of it has to do with chemistry.
And I actually never really thought about it until you brought that up too. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wow, you're right. Like we have, I guess I'm lucky, I'm really lucky to be in a band like that, because it's not everyone, not everyone has that. So,
well, again, people
definitely appreciate that.
People want to rip on some bands. They want to rip on U2 or Nickelback or, Iron Maiden. It's just like, I would bet you be a fly on the wall and listen to the, the members of those bands just kind of chat and hang out, and you'll see why they've been able to be a band for 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So they can hang out. A couple more questions. You got time? I know we've already gone over now. Sure. I told you it goes by quick.
It has. Wow.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, and you kind of touched on it, just the idea of like work-life balance. Because you keep busy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was jack of all trades, because you seem to have your fingers in quite a few things as far as you do work-wise, but also with the music. But just with the other musicians in Laganza, just work-life balance when it comes to partners and kids and other jobs. Like, how do you balance music and other work?
I don't know if there's it's just scheduling. That Derek sometimes can't make some shows, so we have a sub. Another drummer that we can grab for some shows if Derek's having a tough time, he's wrapped up with the kids or whatever, so we can grab another drummer. And there's times when I haven't been able to make shows, and I've got some people that I trust that could fill in for me, and kind of goes like that. It's tough when someone's booking Laganza as an original act and they want all the members there. That's a little different if one guy's not there, because the people around here know who we are and they want to, that's not Tobin. But we just try to do the best we can. Like, if someone can't make a show or we figure it out, we're all respectful enough to give one another the proper notice, to keep the thing moving, keep the wheel moving. And work-wise, just schedules, just the way you schedule stuff. I do all my work during the day, and that's outside of music, and the music stuff's at night. Sometimes I'm like running to a gig though, doing the Tim Hortons shit, splash water in the face thing, and to get to a show. It can be crazy in the summertime sometimes, but it all seems to it's like what would you call a chaotic system that works. I don't know.
So if someone can't make a rehearsal or a gig, and you tell everybody, you don't see an ad up on Craigslist, looking for a guitar player right away, sort of thing. You didn't come to the rehearsal, so you're not playing the show. You're not taking this seriously, are you?
Yeah, you don't get benched. Yeah, I think we're past all that now at this point. Yeah.
Well, because again, like, it's just with expectations, it can get difficult when life happens, or just people still want to be there, but just trying to find the balance between it.
Life happens,
Yeah, and I'll also say too, because like being a working musician, when there's gigs and there's money coming in from it, and it's another one of those things too. I think there's a lot of musicians and bands that are chasing the originals, and and I would say it's hard getting paid for originals compared to covers and tribute bands and stuff.
Definitely, yeah. We do both. We do both things. Like we've done Canadian Music Week in Toronto, and there's no money in that. You're basically, how that whole thing works. You go down and it's fun. It's a fun experience, and the best thing you can hope for is you gain some new fans or whatever. Some more people are listening to you, and but there's tons of stuff like when I was in Nashville, like a lot of these bands in Nashville, like they're working for like Pennies, and these are like world-class musicians. Everywhere I went when I was there, these guys were blowing my mind, and they're working. I can't believe that they don't get paid.
Just supply and demand, just
definitely
oversaturated.
Like the venues know that, so they're like, okay, well, we're not paying you, but there's 1,000 other guys that'll come in and play for tips. So that's what they're stuck with.
That's got to be tough though. Like I understand, like there's a risk going to somewhere like Nashville or LA or New York, where that's a hub for your genre, your style of music. Yeah. But then like you're in there and you realize how crazy the competition actually is.
Oh, it's like the Olympics of music, like
every day.
Yeah, but I love it. I loved seeing all that great talent in one place. It's amazing, you know. Like if you're not good, you ain't playing. So
because that was one of the pieces of advice I got years ago, because I was thinking about moving to the States and doing some work down there, and one of the pieces of advice I got was just like, don't go to New York, LA, or Nashville. They're all oversaturated. It's like, find a place around there where you're within striking distance for things, but you're not competing with them that way.
Yeah, it's very competitive there, I would think. But I think I talked to a few musicians there, and they were like, we're on our 4th gig today. And it's like, wow, like 4 gigs. Yeah, like they play an hour at this bar, then they go down Broadway, and they got to run down and do this other gig, but that's how they're making their living, right? And it's like, wow, I'm so spoiled up here. I do 1 gig and I get paid really well, and I get to go home.
Well, it's finding your niche, finding your market, and finding your balance that way. But I guess everyone's they got that thing that's driving them.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's one of those things where we talk about bands and artists that want to do original stuff. The idea where like, if you hit your lottery numbers in a place like New York, Nashville, or LA, you're probably on a pretty wicked gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, I've heard several times people get flown in to do auditions still. So
really?
I think what I'm trying to get at here is like, for some musicians out there, don't feel like it's an obligation to move there. And also kind of bringing it full circle, talking about some of the, guitar pedals and effects and stuff. A lot of that stuff can happen online these days. A lot of the networks can be built online too.
Yep.
You don't have to bump into them at the bar.
No. Somebody told me one time, like, if you're really good and you're doing something that's really good, it will get out there, and people will, it doesn't matter where you are. The world will take it and present it, you don't have to move to Nashville or to do that. Like, you can do it from anywhere. Like, if you're really good and you're doing something that everyone believes in, then it will happen,
The resources are there these days, and the network's there between Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. When people complain about not getting emails returned or anything, I'm like, have you built a connection? Have you found a warm intro from someone that is a mutual friend? Yeah. Because email's email, but if someone gives you a referral or can vouch for you, it's like, that's what you're looking for. I just hear some approaches to meeting people, and I'm just like, have you really thought this through? Have you really thought this through, how you're trying to make friends here? Because a cold email is not the way to do it. No. Actually, good segue here. Bringing it back to pedals, there's one more question I want to ask you. Has there ever been a pedal you've been super disappointed in? Oh, the Boss Metal Zone. It's like when you put the black TV... and orange one? Yes. It's like it's like, what's that? When the TV would go to snow. Like when that's what it sounds like. It sounds like to me. It sounds like that. Yeah, and there's so much. It's such a joke going on within the pedal community too. It's like, I think someone was trying to figure out Derek Trux's sound, and one guy wrote, "I hate to tell you, but he's using the Boss Metal Zone." It's like, no, he's not. But that's the one that disappointed me the most. It was so expensive back in the day too. It's like, oh, I just got this thing and it sucked. Like, I hated that pedal. But that being said, I'm sure there's someone out there that can make that thing sound amazing with their hands, just not me. You just reminded me of something that it was on my list, but I can't read my own writing because that's how people are these days. Two more things I wanted to bring up. One of them was the G7 Summit. G8, the G8? G8 Summit, yeah. Performing at that. What was that like? That was cool. A little background for anyone who's not familiar. Pardon me? And a little bit of background about what that is for people. Well, all the world leaders came up to Muskoka for a meeting that was probably expensive. I don't know what the meeting was about. So they had the whole town was kind of like tight security because Obama was here, and they just opened the Summit Center, and the first bands to play there was Laganza and Blue Rodeo. So we got to open up for Blue Rodeo. That was quite an experience, like being on a plane in like I guess you could say it's like an arena style setting.
small arena. And that's when I learned that you should get in-ear monitors, because like it was the weirdest thing. You get that delay coming back at you off the back wall when you're in sound check because the place is empty. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to play? And and it filled up, and it was nerve-wracking. I got hit in the eye with a grape in the dressing room right before we went on, so I played that whole show half blind. There was a food fight in the dressing room, and I walked in, and I don't know if you've ever been hit in the eye with a grape.
Not a grape, lacrosse ball, but not a grape. I'd rather lacrosse ball than grape.
Oh, it hurt. Like it was like I thought I got shot.
Was that Jim Cuddy?
No, he didn't throw the grape. It was someone in my camp that did that. But actually, Jim Cuddy came and met us afterwards. He's an amazing guy. Really nice guy. Really tall too. Not that I'm tall, but I look really small next to him. So was Ian Thorley. He's tall guy as well. But Basil, we met Basil and Jim Cuddy, and both were really good guys.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
And other story too, because of security with the surrounding area. You were saying that there's some of the security was outside, like in the woods, basically. Oh yes, yeah, they were on my property actually, where I built my house and my studio. My father-in-law was walking through the woods, and all of a sudden bushes started moving, and it was army guys. Like they're all in like camo, and they're like, because we're close to Deerhurst Resort, which is where the meeting was held, and they were all through the woods, and there's all these checkpoints everywhere. Actually, it was really difficult to get to gigs during that, because the Highway 60 was all checkpoints. You literally have to go through like 20 checkpoints to get through there, and then come back again, and it's the same thing again. What's in those cases? It's guitars. Funny, and people just kind of take over the town for a bit. They did, yeah. It was great. I think, wasn't there something in Toronto as well the week after? I think so, and I think that turned into a big protest thing downtown. Yeah, something happened. Jogging the memory on that one. Yeah, that was part of it. I know I keep saying I only got like one or two more questions, but you mentioned over COVID that building the studio. Yeah. What was that process like? That was awesome. Because like you literally built it. I built it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've been here. It's been something that's been in my mind for years, and I finally, I rebuilt the house here in the woods. I got that long driveway, and I got around to building it, and it was just seeing it now, like not inside of my head. It's like, wow, this is crazy. I sat down afterward when it was all finished, and I'm like, wow, this is what I wanted. And it's, it's so, it's awesome to have someone like you, like yourself, come in here and work and enjoy it. Like, to me, that's like, okay, well, that's great, because that was my nervous part, right? Where what if they come in here like, this isn't going to cut it? Like, and you've already built it. You're like, and it's already built, and it's like, oh no, like, what do I do? But it came together really great, and I'm glad that the people that work in here enjoy it, and that makes me happy. And I love hanging out in here and tinkering around with the engineering stuff. No, it's a pretty sweet space. The vibe's good. The control room, the live room, like they're good sizes for what we need for most of the things that we're actually tracking these days. Yeah. So I think there's this idea that we need like giant live rooms. And like giant control rooms and like tons of unnecessary gear. And it's like your live room's got enough space where you can comfortably do a drum kit. Yeah. Everything else, like that's pretty easy. And the control room's good enough to have the amount of people you need in the room with you, because you don't need tons of people in the control room all the time. No, it's almost a bad thing. Maybe I made this room a little too big. Yeah, I've been in the big studios, and it's like you go in and it's like half the space is being utilized, Yeah. It's like, oh, what's all this room for? And I mean, I'm sure, there are times when you want that big sound in a big room, and you can't turn a small room into a big room, but you can turn a big room into a small room. But Yeah, it's there if you need it. But yeah, I would agree. There's some bigger rooms where most of the time it's not really being utilized. And with especially the last 10 years, with recording projects in general, where you can maybe go to a bigger studio, track your drums in your beds, but then you're getting most of the rest of the work done in a smaller project studio or a private studio.
Yeah.
You know, and it's got to sting a little bit with some of those bigger rooms, but like you don't need, you know, a 800 square foot live room to track guitars.
What did I hear? Billie Eilish? How do you say her name?
Eilish. That's what I'm going with.
There you go. I hear that she recorded a record in a bedroom or a living room.
Bedroom laptop, yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me at all because sometimes they sell the story on these things, but it would not surprise me with the production value you can get on laptops and headphones and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the gear is so different now. It's not, you can do anything.
It's come a long way, and that's one of those things too. Just access to it. One of the things that I bring up often, we talked to kind of bring it full circle to the access that kids have to guitars or drums or whatever. Yep. But like, you can be 10 and have access to GarageBand right now.
Exactly.
Or Reaper or Pro Tools, like for not much for price of admission. So like, that's what I get excited about when I start hearing some of these productions. And a 17-year-old's making some stuff that's amazing sounding.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, a little bit scared because like that sounds really good. And I'm not sure you know what you're doing, but like you have access to the gear. It's not locked behind a paywall. That was the studio before.
Yeah.
You didn't get a chance to use that stuff unless you swept the studio for a bit and could use it overnights. It's like you can just get a couple very affordable microphones in your laptop and get to work.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. I think that's great.
Yeah, it is great. Yeah.
All right. I got through my list here. The one more thing I tried to bait you a little bit on it as far as guitar pedals. If someone throws a guitar pedal into the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
It's a noise gate, so technically no. The MX are noise clamp, so no, it does not. Well, maybe it does because it doesn't work. It doesn't do what it's supposed to. Yeah, I've thrown some pedals in the woods. So. Yeah, I
just think that's the ultimate review. The final conclusion. It's like, does it stay on the on the pedal board? Does it stay on the shelf, or does it fit for the woods?
It goes in the woods.
So
where it belongs.
What about this pedal, this noise gate? What about it where you're just like, this is not happening?
Well, I mean, technically you're trying to achieve tone. You're trying to achieve good tone, and sometimes you get a little bit of noise because you get a buzz from a like a bad receptacle or a room you're in. Then they make this noise gate. Okay, well then the noise gate, it just sucks the tone out of your board. So it's like so counterproductive. I can live with the buzz. I can deal with a little bit of buzz. You're not going to hear it anyway when the band kicks in. But this thing, I have not come across a noise gate that does what it says it's going to do without messing with your sound. Maybe you have. I don't know.
I'm just thinking, and hopefully we can get something from this to put it into the universe for people who are making guitar pedals. Someone out there that makes noise gates just said challenge accepted. They'll find one that it's a good noise gate where it's not killing the tone.
You can send one to me and I'll give it a woods review. Or you can pick it up on the back 40 if I don't like it.
Sounds good. Brian, I think this is probably a good place to wrap things up here.
Yeah.
Where can everyone find you online?
Good question. You can go to Reverb Nation, Laganza on Reverb Nation. I think I'm probably saying that wrong. I haven't been on there in a long time.
No, it's on there.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's still on there.
Yeah, so that's the best place to find what we're doing. And Facebook. Yeah, hit me up on Facebook.
And Tonehouse has an Instagram page
Instagram,
as well.
Yes, Tonehouse on Instagram.
I'll put all the links and the details below.
Perfect. Yeah.
On YouTube here.
Awesome.
Excellent, Brian. Thank you so much for joining me today. I had a great time. It was good being able to chat a little more in detail about some of these things because we've had some good chats at the studio the last couple of weeks, but it's fun to be able to, dig a little bit more into some of these stories.
Definitely.
Thanks again to everybody for joining the chat today. Anything else we didn't get to on the chat, we'll get to that after. I did want to put this up here. Don was saying on YouTube, organized chaos. That is musicianship in a nutshell. There's just always chaos. There's always things going on, and you just find a way to organize it. All right. Thanks again, everybody. My name is Mike Langford. This has been DearBands Live, and thanks again to our guests today, Brian Hawley. Reminder to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. It does help support the channel. That's our time for today. Thanks for watching.